we come across these woes, right? Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth by reason of the other voices of the trumpet, of the three angels which are yet to sound. Okay, so Rome has fallen. An enormous sliver of the Roman Empire is gone, but is the Iron Empire finished? No, it is not. It is. This thing metamorphosizes, and we'll see that even when we get to the end of this of tonight, the sixth trumpet. They're not done. Holy Roman Empire is coming down the track, or had stood up by the time the sixth trumpet had finished. So this Iron Empire just keeps metamorphosizing. But if nothing else, the woe language to me, when I look at that, signals a transition. So you've got trumpet, 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 then it's got these woe trumpets, right? So it suggests to you that probably these are going to target someone else, which is kind of obvious when you think about the fact that the language of the fourth trumpet is the target will be destroyed. It was destroyed, so we are now looking for another target of the Iron Empire. We'll come back to that in a second. Okay. So, first woe, fifth trumpet. I'll suggest to you up front that this was fulfilled by the Saracens, the Arabs basically, the Muslims, okay? Muhammed being the key individual who founded that movement. When I look back at history and I look at the clues, I'll show you in a second why I think that, they appear to have fulfilled this trumpet. Okay. So we'll just jump back and forth from our Bibles to the PowerPoint. Revelation 9 verse 1, let's just read it. Okay, the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key to the bottomless pit. Okay. So what is all this about? This whole chapter is, as are the first four trumpets, they are very symbolic. They are kind of tricky because they have you scratching your head thinking, what on earth could this be talking about? What is this star? We've talked about the concept of fallen stars being representative of leaders who might have fallen out of a certain position, but stars are certainly used of leaders in Scripture. Isaiah 14:12 is an example, the king of Babylon. But what's this key? What's this shaft? What's this bottomless pit? Okay, so we've got a leader. As I made the point last time, some of the clues are more insightful than others. Would you expect a military assault on some portion of the Roman Empire to involve leadership? Yep, I'd say so. There is a bit more to this clue than that, but I think the key and the shaft are probably the more insightful, unique clues that help us identify this party. Okay, now we've got this reference also to a bottomless pit. This is the Greek abyssos, or I'm sure that's not the right pronunciation. It means abyss. It's used in Luke 8, verse 31, I think it is. Yeah, in the Legion story of the sea. Okay, so it's a reference in symbol, you would assume, to some sort of an abyss, right? What I wonder could that be? Now, you can sort of cheat, and I'm going to cheat a little bit here and say, well, I know, because of other reasons, before I even get to this verse, I know this is targeting a portion of the Roman power in some sense, okay? So the abyss, I assume, is some portion of that. There is an alternative reading to that, and you can read it either way, which is that the source of the invader is the abyss, right? Which, if you're talking about the Muslims, would be Saudi Arabia, but that is less consistent. That phrase, bottomless pit, is used quite a bit throughout Revelation, and it's more consistent to read it as the target, which is the Roman power as it stood at that point. Okay. And then the last thing here is this shaft, okay? And this comes up again. This seems to be an absolutely key word. That something is being characterised as a shaft. Okay, I'm reading for the ESV, by the way, so if you're wondering why it's not in the King James, it's because it doesn't translate it as well, particularly that shaft phrase. It doesn't break it out as cleanly. But there's definitely an abyss, and there is a shaft. There is an access way, some sort of passageway, whatever it may be, associated with that abyss. Okay, so key to the shaft would somehow provide access, the leader access to this abyss that was the Roman power. Okay, so yes, it's kind of cryptic. Now, if you look at after Rome fell, which we can because we've been working forward chronologically as I suggested we should, and you look at about AD 500, because it fell in 476, you look at, well, what is the potential target at that point in history, as it turned out? What is left after it fell? And actually there's quite a bit left, because the Byzantine Empire, or the eastern half as it was, sometimes it was in halves, sometimes it was in thirds, but at this point, there's not much left apart from the Byzantine Empire. It is headquartered in Constantinople, which is like Istanbul in Turkey today, and it is going quite well. Okay, there was a point where you had 2 emperors, at some points where you had 3 emperors, but the Eastern Emperor got through all that mess that was happening to the Western Emperor relatively unscathed. They did get touched up by Gaiseric. We saw that last time. They took him on in the ocean. That did not end well for them, just like it didn't end well for the Western Roman Empire. But generally they were unscathed in comparison to the Western. And that on your screen, if you look at the yellow shading there, so the purple shaded areas, that's roughly what they had at around 8500. So the Byzantine Empire was pretty big, had a big footprint in the area, even though their Western counterparts were done. So, was there anything else substantive in terms of the Roman power at this point in history? No, there was not. The Holy Roman Empire had not stood up. That came in 8800. That will suggest at the end is probably the target of the vials. But at this point in history, you've only got one target. It's easy by deduction. The Byzantines, you would think, are the targets of these judgments. Okay. Let's keep reading. Revelation 9 verse 2, we come across this shaft again. He opened the bottom. So I'm reading from the King James, but the screen is actually more helpful. Actually, I'll read from the screen. He opened the shaft of the bottomless pit, and from the shaft rose smoke, like the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened, and the smoke, with the smoke from the shaft. Okay, so now we've got this, somehow there's this access way to get after the Romans. This is the shaft, and there's this smoke coming out of the shaft. What is the smoke is the obvious question. And again, repetition, there's a couple of occurrences of the word. They're doing some sort of damage because they're darkening the sun and the air, which with your heavenly symbolism hat on would point to powers. So this is pointing to the Roman powers. They're going to get touched up by something that's being styled smoke, coming out of something that's being styled a shaft. Okay, but what's the smoke? Obvious question. What is the smoke? And how is it going to impact the empire? Well, it tells you, okay, you don't sort of have to well, it tells you, but unfortunately it tells you in the form of a symbol. So you just go from one symbol to the next symbol. In verse 3, it tells you there came locusts out. Okay, so the smoke was essentially locusts. And under them was given the power of scorpions. Okay, so now we've got smoke. You zoom in closer, it's actually a bunch of, or out of the smoke at least, there's a lot of these locusts, and they seem to have this scorpion-like power. Well, what is scorpion-like about locusts? Nothing. These are special symbolic locusts. What do I think of when I think of locusts? I think of just volume numbers, right? So if this is intimating an army, which I'll suggest to you in due time it is, it's saying it's a very, very big army. Lots and lots and lots of soldiers. And potentially is alluding to the destructive nature of locusts, because they are, I think we all know they're pretty destructive. What are scorpions all about? What does that mean if the locusts are in some way scorpion-like? Well, it elsewhere directs you to look at the tail of the scorpion. And if you look at the scorpions and what happens, well, what's on their tail? On their tail is a sting. What happens when a scorpion stings you? Generally, typically, it hurts an awful lot, but rarely kills, which is consistent with some of the language we're going to see as we keep moving through. This power that is going to go after the Byzantines is going to do immense damage, but it will not finish them off. So it's analogous to the Trumpet 1, 2, 3. It would, because they did not finish the Central Roman Empire off, did they? Trumpet 4 was, back to the sniper analogy, Trumpet 4 was the headshot. Trumpet 5 is not. Trumpet 6 is also going to finish off the Byzantines. Trumpet 5 will not finish them off. It will not kill them, And that is where I think the scorpion analogy works quite well. Another characteristic, so again, as I said in one of the talks, you got to sort of have your Sherlock Holmes hat on. You don't necessarily know exactly what you're looking at yet. You're just looking to interpret clues and try and piece the puzzle together. Trumpets 5 and 6, we are given a lot more clues than 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so I don't know if it's easier, but I think in a way it probably is easier. But it is hard to figure them all out because you sort of want to figure out what all of them mean. And some are easier than others. Anyhow, verse 4, it was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads. Okay, seal of God in their foreheads. That sounds like familiar language. What does this mean? It appears, so there's language in chapter 7, verse 3, hurt not the trees, neither the sea, nor the trees, the earth, sea, trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. So this appears to be a contrast to what we're seeing in 7 verse 3, which is the idea of the saints being symbolically sealed as being acceptable to God. But then by contrast, there's these people who are being styled not having the seal of God in their foreheads. Does that sound like a reasonable description for the Byzantines? Probably, because they were absolutely apostate, they were polytheistic, they literally were into idols. So it appears to be a fit there, right? And it's also saying that it would appear that people who are not in that camp are probably going to be spared or largely spared by this assaulting power, whatever it is. Okay. Now, verse 5. So obviously the scorpion analogy is important because it keeps coming up. So we come across it in verse 5 again. To them was given that they should not kill. So I'm suggesting to you this is just a reiteration of what scorpions do. They do not kill. They just really hurt. That they should be tormented 5 months. And their torment was as the torment of a scorpion when he strikes a man. Okay, reiteration of the same thing. So, what do I conclude from that? The army would not finish the Byzantine Empire off, as I said before. Okay, it is scorpion-like in that sense, this invading force. What does the 150-day or the 5 months point to? 30 days in a Jewish month, 150 days. Apply the day for the year principle, which is reasonable in prophecy, and you end up with a 150-year period in this verse. But then you see a similar time period. It appears to be a reiteration, but I think it is actually another time period of 150 years in a subsequent verse, and you can end up with 300 years using that, which we'll come back to in a minute. Okay, verse 7 though, John kind of zooms in and he looks at this locust army. So it's like he saw this smoke, he zooms in, he says, oh, actually there's locusts coming out, right. Then he zooms in on the locusts and he says, well, they're funny looking locusts. They look sort of like horses actually. So maybe we've got ourselves a cavalry army here, or an army with a lot of horses. I can see crowns of gold, he says. I can see faces of men. So there's something characteristically manly about the faces of these locusts. What is this? I wonder. Is it facial hair? Hair of women, teeth of lions, right? So it's building up this picture of obviously a symbolic creature. This doesn't exist. And it's just, we're just getting clue after clue after clue of what this invading army is going to look like or be like. Okay. Long hair. Ferocity. Were they ferocious fighters perhaps? Is that what we're looking for when we go back and scan for these guys in history? Possibly. And then verse 10, as I said before, third time lucky, tails like unto scorpions. It's obviously important, right? This is not going to be a finisher offer. And again, it talks about a 5-month period. And I would suggest to you it is additional, not a reiteration of the previous one. This is the, if you like, hurt. They're going to hurt them for 5 months. Previously it was torment for 5 months. So you say there's a hurt, 150 days, years, a torment, 150 days, years, and you get that together and you can come to a 300-year period potentially, that this is indicating this power is going to damage the Byzantines. So I sort of put all that together. What are we looking for? I think we are looking for probably cavalry-focused army is going to go after the Byzantine Empire after 84-76 or somewhere around there, probably over a 300-year period. And the soldiers perhaps going to be have reputations for being extremely ferocious. I mean, soldiers are pretty tough as it is, but these ones perhaps are going to be particularly extremely so. Long hair, facial hair, gold-looking headgear, and they're going to go after probably apostates and not necessarily true believers. That's what I get out of those clues. Now, I suggested to you at the start, I sort of didn't say spoiler alert, but this is the Arabs. Did the Arabs fulfill this? I think they did, almost perfectly. Every single clue fits, and I don't think you have to sort of do round peg, square hole stuff. I think it fits very nicely. So, a little bit of history. AD 610, so we're 100 or so years after Rome fell, 100 odd years. We see that Muhammad, very famous individual, obviously, because he was the founder of Islam. Okay, so some folks here are from the Middle East. Islam's huge in that region, yeah, Ellie? Yeah? No? Islam's not huge in the Middle East? I think it is. Huge-ish. And he claims to have had a vision, went to a cave, was greeted by the angel Gabriel, and he was ultimately delivered what we now call the Quran, which is the Islamic holy scriptures. Okay, so that's how Muhammad came to be. And prior to that, he'd been a polytheistic, idolatrous, and all the people in that region were. They were not Muslims. Islam started here. Prior to that, they just believed in many gods and so forth. Okay, so he was brought to a realisation of Islam in this cave by the angel Gabriel, and then he started to spread the word. Muhammad's followers were initially few in number and experienced hostility from polytheists. So the people who did not believe in one God, which is what Islam teaches, had difficulty with this. They gave him a difficult time, and for about 13 years. And he actually had to fly away, or run away rather, from the persecution. He went from Mecca to Medina, which are both still cities in Saudi Arabia today. Okay, 622, he gets away. And in Medina, he gets a bit of respite, and he starts to bring everything together. And he actually, as he spreads this religion, he actually starts to convert more and more people, and it catches on like wildfire. And you've now got this thing occurring where the previously disparate, nomadic, tribal people of that Saudi region start to band together. They start, the religion is acting like a glue to bring them together. So, you might speculate that the fleeing from Mecca to Medina was perhaps his fall from heaven, the heaven of the polytheists, maybe. What I think is less speculative is that I think the key that Revelation talks about is Islam or the Quran, or however you want to look at it, because that locust army was previously a rabble of polytheistic nomadic tribes, and Islam, absolutely historic fact, completely brought them all together with this ironclad resolve to destroy people who were polytheistic, which is what they used to be, which is why they didn't like the Byzantines, and to go and judge them. This almost sort of counteracted another piece of scripture. So I've got it from the, I think it's a Lexium Bible, Genesis 16 verse 12. It talks about the fact that the Arabs would be kind of at each other's throats. Yeah? And this prophecy, in a sense, counteracted that curse, if you like. This is Ishmael. He shall be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and the hand of everyone will be against him. And he will live in hostility with all his brothers. Okay? Very difficult to be effective as a people if there's just disunity everywhere. Okay? Muhammad addressed the disunity that had been present in those Middle Eastern people, and he brought them together using Islam. And they became, as a consequence, a very powerful and motivated force. They believed they had the power of God on their side to deal with idolaters and polytheists and such like. So now they've got a just cause. Now, 10 years after that, Muhammad dies, and he is succeeded by Abu Bakr, who was also pretty passionate about Islam, and he took control by that point of the whole of the Arabian Peninsula. So now there's momentum building. They called for jihad. So you hear the word jihad today, it means a struggle. And they specifically targeted, guess who they targeted? The Byzantine Empire. Okay? The Muslims did not like the Byzantines because they saw the Byzantines, who believed in a trinity, as polytheistic, and they loved their idols. And the Muslims hated the idols. So they decided to take up arms and start attacking them. Okay? The Byzantines, the Arabs' first clash may have been at the Battle of Muta, traditionally, so that's the ruins of that town, 629. In any case, within a few years, they found themselves in conflict with the Arabs, and according to Howard Johnson, they could only be likened to a human tsunami. Okay, so this is locust language, isn't it? They mobilised, this is 10, 20 years down the track, not that long. They were being likened by, this is one historian's opinion, to a human tsunami. They are on the march, and they don't like Byzantines. Okay? Hordes of Saracens. Now, this is just a bit more specific information that's recorded historically, things that Abu Bakr said. This is a famous saying of Abu Bakr. Remember that passage we saw in Revelation about the grass and don't hurt the grass, but just the people who've, don't hurt the people who have the wrong seal on their foreheads, not the people who have the right seal on their foreheads, essentially. You will find some people, this is as he's talking to his people, you'll find some religious persons who live retired in monasteries. This appears to be alluding more to true believers, so maybe monasteries isn't the best translation, but anyhow, this is what he said. Proposed to themselves to serve God that way. Let them alone, don't worry about those people. So there's clearly a class of people he's leaving alone. Who are the people he's putting a target on? Who does he want dead? You'll find another sort of people that belong to the synagogue of Satan, interesting phrase, who have shaven crowns. Be sure you cleave their skulls and give them no quarter till they either turn Mohammedans or pay tribute. Kill them, tax them, deal with them. The ones with the shaved scalps, who had the shaved scalps? The Byzantine priesthood. That was a thing they did. And they knew that. So they said, just look for those guys who've shaved the top of their heads, kill them. They are the ones who are into idols and polytheism. They are the Byzantines. So that's how he briefed his people. He also, this is the same speech, he says, interestingly, think of the language of Revelation, quote unquote, destroy no palm trees, nor burn any fields of corn, cut down no fruit trees, nor do any mischief to cattle, only such as kill to eat. So there was actually, when you read I haven't read the whole thing, but I've read a fair bit of this speech Abu Bakr gave. There is quite a strong sense of morality, as you'd expect from a Muslim, in the speech, but he just really didn't like Byzantines, and he thought it was okay to kill them, and he did kill them. He killed a lot. But interesting that the language, accidentally you would assume, appears, it's almost like he's quoting Revelation. Okay, after that, they went on the march. So they've taken the Arabian Peninsula, big parcel of land, kind of large part of the Middle East, but not the northern section of the Middle East, which is Israel, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, that kind of area, what we'd call that today. The Battle of Yarmuk, which is a river just south of the Sea of Galilee, that was a key turning point, though, because that is where the Byzantine forces and these Arab Muslim forces went head to head, and the Byzantines didn't fare very well. So the Battle of Yarmuk was a major battle between the Byzantines and the Muslims. The battle consisted of a series of engagements that lasted 6 days in August 636 near the Yarmuk River. Okay? It is regarded as one of the most decisive battles in military history, and it marked the first great wave of early Muslim conquest. So this possibly is the reason for the language of the shaft, because once this parcel of land was opened up, they've got access to Turkey, what we would call Turkey, the prime real estate, if you like, of the Byzantine Empire. They had to conquer this section of land to get access militarily to that other land to the north. So possibly the conquest of this parcel of land is a reference to the shaft. This is the access way they needed to get those massive armies up into what we would call Turkey to deal with the Byzantines. So anyhow, so you sort of, this is a map showing the expansion from 622 to 750, so it's about 130 years. Shows how they first took, so the red, the darker colour, they first took the Saudi Peninsula, then they spread it out, and then they spread even further. And yeah, by 750, they were quite dominant, the Arabs. They actually, in the process of doing that and going up there, they did besiege Constantinople. But would you expect they took... Constantinople, of course, is the capital of the Byzantine Empire. You take Constantinople, you essentially cut the head off the beast. Would you expect, based on the language of the fifth trumpet, that the Arabs would be successful taking Constantinople? You would absolutely not. The scorpion images, the not kill, it says straight out what it will not be destroyed. No, and they didn't. They could not take Constantinople. So they did immense damage to the Byzantines, but they just could not take Constantinople. Okay, torment, hurt men, etc. And then things sort of got turned on their head, because actually the Arabs started to after 100 odd years, they started to go backwards, and there was a key battle called the Battle of Lalakaon, or Lalakaon rather, where the Arabs were actually defeated terribly, and they started to sort of regress in the region, and this is considered by historians a turning point. Fast forward about 50 years, and they're really starting to go backwards. 8920, Romanos Lekapinos, he sends his general John Koukanos, who was quite Koukuos, I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation, I hope there's no Greek people here, and he starts to aggressively go after the Arabs. They'd been pestering them for about 300 years, incidentally. It started in about AD 620 odd. And it had already 50 years prior started to turn. And this general really dealt an immense blow to the Arabs. And they never really stood up again. They went backwards from this point in time, around 923, 930, that sort of region. Okay. Success in the Italian peninsula occurred, and it opened up a new period of Byzantine domination. Okay. So that was it. So when you look at the 300-year period, did it start in about 630? Absolutely, that's when it started. That's when Muhammad got rolling. Did it finish for the Arabs in about 930? Yep. Does that fit the 300 years? Yes, it does. So it seems like a reasonable interpretation. What did they look like? So we had all these other clues, so we're just going to quickly rattle through the other clues. What did they look like? Well, the Arabs did tend to have facial hair. They did sometimes grow their hair. The Romans were distinctively shaven, so you can understand that being used as a point of difference. They looked differently. Faces of men may be a reference to facial hair because the Romans were clean shaven. Okay? History will tell you that. And yeah, they seem to have just more hair generally than the Romans. And that stuck out in the vision, and it was distinctive. The armour, we're given descriptions of the armour. Did they have iron breastplates? Armour, if you go back in history, yes, there's armour, Turkish armour from the 15th century, so late in this, there's Arabic armour in the Met, and yes, it does fit this description of iron. Can you find evidence they had other types of armour like leather? Yes, you can. It wasn't exclusively what's described in Revelation, but does it fit generally? Yes, it does. And the headgear, did they have gold headgear? Sometimes, yes. There's also views they might have had yellow turbans. I didn't actually find evidence for that, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist, because I did read that in some books. But it seems to be credible that these armaments fitted with the Arab people. So that's the First woe trumpet, fifth trumpet. The Arabs went after the Byzantines for about 300 years. They caused them absolute misery, but they could not finish them off because they could not take Constantinople, and eventually they sort of faded and became a bit of a non-entity relative to what they were during their heyday. Okay, that's the first one. Second woe trumpet, sixth trumpet. This is the one that's going to finish off the Byzantines, we know that. This is where it gets a little bit more interesting. So, one woe is past, two come. I keep talking about 5 and 6, two woe trumpets, because the third woe trumpet is the seventh trumpet, which is expanded out into the vials, which we're not dealing with. So I'll really just focus on, or finish up on trumpet 6. So, 2 to come, but we're going to deal with only the first one of those. Now, would you expect it to be targeting the same party as trumpet 5? Yes, you would, because there hasn't been that sharp language transition. And if you look back at history, again, the Holy Roman Empire hadn't really stood it up yet. So there really is only one significant target of the Iron Empire at this point. Still, the Holy Roman Empire had stood up yet, but the language appears to be directed at the same party as trumpet 5. Okay, but maybe it goes for the Holy Roman Empire, but it doesn't appear to be the case. We'll see in a second. All right, so we get this language. Come to 9:14. Let's just read it quickly. Sixth angel. So spoke to the sixth angel. This voice came out of the altar, which is interesting because that's, of course, a reference to the altar, if you trace it back, where the prayers came from. Sixth angel, which had the trumpet, loose the 4 angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. Okay, so the river Euphrates, that's a satellite image of the river Euphrates. It's worth looking on a map, which is the little one actually on the screen there, where that runs. It runs pretty much along the eastern edge of Turkey. So it appears to be, at a glance, the King James at least appears to be saying that there's these 4 angels. So again, you might think 4 leaders of an assaulting army in the river Euphrates, which seems a bit odd. But when you look at the ESV, most other translations, it's actually more correctly at the great river Euphrates. So this is the language of the Euphrates. You've got your Turkish Empire, or Anatolia as it was called. You've got the river Euphrates on the eastern edge, and Euphrates in some sense is like a border, I suppose, holding back these 4 angels, this invading force. Okay. It suggests to me that the proponents or the perpetrators of this 6th trumpet are going to come from the east of Turkey, and they're somehow going to get across the Euphrates and get in there and do some more damage than the Arabs did. Okay. Verse 15, the 4 angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour, a day, a month and a year. We won't go through this, we'll run out of time, but again, you can apply a day for a year principle to this. We'll come to the time period in a second. Again, and now we're back to this third language, talks about slaying the third part of men. So this is more emphatic language. We are slaying them as distinct from hurting, tormenting, that kind of language of the 5th trumpet. This is a language of finality. This is a language of, if you like, trumpet number 4, where it looks like the Byzantines are going to get finished off. Okay. What does that, if you add up the numbers, the math is on the screen there, you end up at about 391 years. That's the time period, suggesting that this assault would last about that long, using the day, again, the day for a year principle. More clues. Verse 16, we're told that there are 200,000 of these. So that's 200 million invading soldiers. Now, it uses the words myriad, which is interesting, which is what 10,000 means. Is it literally 200 million soldiers? We don't know. Probably over 400 years, is that possible? Maybe. We'll never get the data to prove it either way. But I just read it as what you are safe in saying is it is obviously an immense army, which is quite similar to trumpet 5, where we've got that locust analogy. Locust analogy would lead you to believe it's a very big army. This is even more emphatic. It doesn't rely on symbols. It just straight out says, the number might be symbolic, but it speaks to me of a very, very big invading force. What else are we told about this force? I saw the horses in a vision. On them sat them having breastplates of fire. Says something about breastplates of fire. Jacinth, which is zircon, red zircon. There's a different way of saying it. It's the stone, probably a stone pictured there. There's different colours of it. There's a blue as well. But it's the colour of redness. Brimstone, so sulphur. The heads of the horses were as the heads of lions. Out of the mouths issued fire and smoke and brimstone. So that to me is a language of combustion, energy, burning, fire, that kind of thing. So we're looking for something like that when we look back in history and try and identify this party. What else? Verse 18, by these three, so the three, by the way, just back up. Verse 18 talks about these three. What are the three? I think they are fire, smoke and brimstone. So these are key clues. Fire, smoke, brimstone, they're all pretty related. By these three was a third part, so this third of the Roman Empire is going to be killed. Okay, so this is the headshot. This is going to kill the Byzantine Empire, finished. By the brimstone which issued out of the mouths. Okay, so something about this combustion, whatever, this picture that's been painted, it is going to be brutal and it is going to be integral in the finishing off of the Byzantines. Okay, I've already made that point. It is going to be fatal. Fire, smoke and brimstone. Remember those words. Remember those clues. We are looking back in history. We're going to do it in a minute. I'm going to tell you who I think this is. And we're going to find these things fit absolutely beautifully to the power that did finish off the Byzantine Empire. So, what are we looking for? Put all the clues together. Another vast, cavalry-focused adversary originating from very likely east of the Euphrates, because they're being held back by the Euphrates. They can't be on the west of the Euphrates, because that's where the Turks are. That's where the Byzantines are. Okay, so probably from over there. They're going to finish off the Byzantines around when the fifth trumpet finishes off, you would think, if it's chronological. Trumpets 2 and 3 were a little more overlappy, but generally it's sequential. And certainly you wouldn't expect it to be before the Arabs did their thing. So sometime after that, you're looking for this party to come in. They're probably going to operate over about 4 centuries, and they're going to have this particularly key destructive power or characteristic or something that you would associate with fire and combustion and smoke. What could it be? I'll suggest to you that this was fulfilled by the Turks, because there's no doubt historically who finished off the Byzantines. It was the Turks. So when you look back and you know, let's be honest, you can goal seek, you can look back, who finished off the Byzantine Empire? It was the Turks, the Ottoman Turks. So you can go to that and then you look back at Turkish history and you see, oh yeah, they gave the Byzantines a lot of grief for about 400 years, and then you're just looking for the 4 leaders, and I'll suggest to you who I think the leaders are. I don't think you can be dogmatic about that, about all of them, but I think you'd be dogmatic about who the last one is, who we'll come to in a minute, because he knocked down the walls of Constantinople, and you can probably be just about dogmatic about the first one, because he got the whole Turkish thing going. So that's him on the screen, Tughril. He came out of what we would call Pakistan, so yes, east of the Euphrates, tick. He became powerful because the caliph of that area gave him his daughter to marry, because he squashed a rebellion in the area from the Abbasids. Okay, so he gained power through marriage, essentially, because he was a successful military leader against this rebellion, and he formed the Seljuk Turk Empire, the Seljuk Turkish Empire. And as you see on the screen, he took command of the Caliphate's armies and military offensives against, just like the Arabs, the Byzantine Empire. He didn't like them either, in an effort to expand his empire's borders and unite the Islamic world. So you can see the traces of the fifth trumpet, the traces of Islam carrying through into the sixth trumpet. So in a way, you can credit Muhammad with the whole lot in a funny way. So it became a very, very powerful force. This is just a different manifestation of it. Now, I did find one, so Gibbon actually, who is perhaps the most famous historical writer on this period of history, or the Roman Empire at least, he makes the point that the myriads of Turkish horse overspread a frontier of 600 miles from Taurus to Erzurum. So I won't read the whole thing, but he literally uses the word myriads of horses to describe the Turkish, at this period of history, 1050, when Tughril's doing his thing, he reflects back on the myriads of horses because evidently there was just so many of them. Immense cavalry-based army. Would you expect that from the clues that are given in the book of Revelation? Yes, you would. Yes, you would. In fact, if they didn't have a massive cavalry, you'd say, this is not the ones. This is not the people who are going to finish off the Byzantines, because they, unless you misread the symbol, all right? Maybe you re-look at the symbol if that's what's happening. But you don't need to, because they did have a massive cavalry, and it fits the bill. And they did finish off the Byzantines, as it turned out. Second leader I'm going to suggest to you, I basically just looked at who were the most prominent Turkish leaders who did the most damage to the Byzantines in history. There does appear to be four that stand out particularly strongly. Alp Arslan is another one. I won't read that to you, but suffice to say, he did immense damage heading into the back end of the 11th century to the Byzantines. He didn't like them either. And he was really just an extension of that Seljuk movement that had been begun by Tughril. Yeah. All right. So around this point, they've taken a lot of land, and but they're just peppering away at Anatolia, which is Turkey, on the western edge of which is Constantinople, which is the crown jewel. That's what everybody wants to take, who really doesn't like the Byzantine Empire, because that is the head. They had not got that far yet. And then there's kind of this setback. The Seljuks, actually I will go through that. 1194, the Seljuks actually collapsed around this point, just heading into the end of the 12th century. Okay, 1194, the Seljuks actually dissolve. So you kind of think, remember we talked about prophetic fake-outs last time? If you're in the meeting at this time and you're looking at the book of Revelation, you think, I thought maybe it was the Turks who were going to finish off the Byzantines, but it doesn't look like it is. Oh well, because they're gone. The Seljuks are gone. But the Ottoman Turks rose up out of the Seljuks. Okay, so it's like a second wave of the Turks. And this man, Osman I, got back into it. He started raiding the Byzantines, took out major cities. The campaigns of the Turks, this is what one historian says, took an especially devastating character at the beginning of the 14th century, and the front in Asia Minor was breached in many places with unheard ferocity. The Turks overran defenceless villages and so on. Okay, so they did enormous damage heading into the 13th, 14th centuries. Osman was a very destructive leader. Now, some of you who have, I'll just do a brief tangent, some of you who've looked at like the Expositor or that sort of thing, which I did, in that book it will suggest to you that the four angels are the Seljuks and the Ottoman Turks, but then also the Tatars and the Mongols, so Genghis Khan, Tamerlane. That may be right, I'm not sure, but I'm suggesting to you it's actually these four Turkish leaders, because when I looked at history, I found the Mongols and the Tatars had almost no impact whatsoever on the Byzantines, and in fact the Mongols made a military alliance with them, and the Tatars didn't seem to do a great deal at all. So do your own research, but I looked and I could not see. The Seljuks, they absolutely destroyed, as did the Ottomans, the Byzantine Empire. The Tatars and the Mongols, they did a lot of damage all over the world, but Byzantines, I couldn't find much evidence they'd done much damage. So I suspect it's more just the Seljuks and the Ottomans, but you do your own research. Okay, lucky last, there is no doubt who the fourth angel is, if you like. Mahomet II. So this is the individual who took out Constantinople. So in Constantinople at the time was Constantine the 11th. So he was the emperor. They weren't getting on very well. Okay. And they essentially decided to go to war. And Mahomet laid siege to the city in April 1453, which is interesting. And obviously I'm telling you that what happened, which is it fell on the 29th of May, so about, 6-7 weeks later. So it wasn't a formality, it took a little while, but that's relatively quick for sieges, you might say. They took Constantinople, 29th of May, 1453. Incredible. After like 1,000 years, finally someone chopped the head off the Byzantine Empire. Time period wise, you know where this one finished, right? This trumpet, some starts and finish dates, as I've said before, you can speculate. I don't think you'd be too dogmatic. This one, the end date, I think you can be pretty dogmatic. It ended when Constantinople fell. Historians know the exact day. You go 391 years backwards from that, you get to the period where Tughril Beg basically became empowered by the Caliph. It's around that time. So yeah, it does appear to fit time frame wise. What is particularly interesting about this story, though, is, which some of you might already know this just the way it happened. So, I find it difficult not to see some level of providence or angelic intervention, this sort of thing, because the difference maker was, as to why they finally took Constantinople, was technology, which is kind of not surprising because that's how often wars are won. Not always, but sometimes technology plays a big role. It played a big role in this. It wasn't the only factor. They had they had a huge army. They actually had a navy which played a role. But the key factor that swung this siege, the historians generally suggest, was the cannon. They had this massive cannon called I think it's the basilic. Again, I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation. And they got this cannon because a guy developed it to sell it and make money, fair enough. But he actually went to Constantine the 11th as the big guy in the area, the emperor, to sell it first. And he didn't want to buy it, thought it was a bit too expensive. And did he really need it? He wasn't interested in invading. But what he didn't think about was who might buy it if he didn't buy it. And the person who bought it was Muhammad II. So he bought this massive cannon. I don't think it was just one, but and they're still, you can go and see them. They're in Turkey. That's a real picture on the screen. And this thing, so look at the stats. 7 metres long, diameter 76 centimetres, so you got your cannonballs are half a tonne, and it can shoot things 1.6 kilometres. So that is why Constantinople fell. Technology. This was new technology. Even by today's standards, that is a big cannon. It's a very big cannon. That's a big cannonball. That is why it fell, because Constantine didn't buy it. He probably wasn't meant to buy it. Mahomet was meant to buy it because time was up. Literally, the clock had started ticking, and 1453 was coming up, and that city was going to fall, and it fell. Exactly as predicted. Constantinople fell. The Byzantine Empire had its head chopped off after about 1,000 years of existing, and all because someone didn't buy a cannon. This is how God works. Okay, God can do whatever He wants. This was a millennium-long, super powerful empire that got knocked off by the Turks, who were numerous, but those walls were just about impossible with old technology. Not with this. And that was what swung the whole thing. And that was that. That is the end of the Byzantine Empire. Now, does a cannon, remember the key clues, smoke, fire, brimstone, jacinth, does they sound like reasonable clues for a cannon? Given the technology didn't exist when in AD 95, when this was written, what symbols could God give to make people realise what He was alluding to? It didn't exist. So He's got to paint a picture of this technology 1,400 years before it's developed, Seems like a pretty reasonable set of clues to give to me. You make up your own mind, but to me, that is magic. That is not like bad magic, but just the phrase, it's just awesome. It's just awesome, okay? That is God laying out exactly what will happen, giving enough clues. They could look forward in history, and I'm sure when this was happening, whatever there was of the ecclesia knew what was going on. They were thinking, here we go. Finally, they're going to go. And they did. And we can look back from where we are in history. We can just look at the page of history, and it's all there. Who took out the Byzantines? An enemy that fits the bill of Revelation 9 incredibly, impeccably well. Perfectly, in fact. Absolutely perfectly. That is the marvel of Bible prophecy, brothers and sisters. And just to make it clear, this is probably what I think the language of verses 18 and 19 is aligning with. Just pointing out different parts of the canon, the fuse, the opening of the mouth, talks about the mouth, etc. You have a look in your own time, but I can quite happily align that phraseology to the parts of a canon. So that was that. Italian part of the Roman Empire, dead. Eastern part took a lot longer. Eastern part of the Roman Empire, dead. Is the Iron Empire dead? Would you expect it to be dead with Book of Daniel in your hand? No, you would not, because the Book of Daniel says the Iron Empire will get destroyed by who? Like destroyed by who? Who's going to destroy the Iron Image? Sorry? Stone. Who's the stone? Christ. So Mahomet II, he was a religious man, but he certainly wasn't Jesus Christ. So this was never going to be the end of that system. It's just another head chopped off. What happens, as I said before, AD 800. So while this is going on, the Holy Roman Empire stands up, back up in sort of what we'd call Western Europe, Charlemagne. And guess what? They're still doing their thing. So severe judgments have been handed out. But verse 20, 21, the rest of the men which were not killed by these plagues repented not of the works of their hands, that they should not worship devils and idols of gold and silver and brass and so on. So the Iron Empire just morphed. All that effort for what? To morph into something else, which is why we have the seventh trumpet, third woe trumpet, which is the vials. And that is where this individual, Charlemagne, or not him so much, but the empire he set up, the Holy Roman Empire, they're going to get it in the neck with the 6 vials. But that's obviously not what we're going to look at. That can be topic for another occasion, God willing.